Now then, we're joined in studio by Professor Paul Rouse, who's with the UCD School of History. The Hurlers, his most recent book, is out in paperback. He's also author of Sport in Ireland, a History. You're very welcome.
Thanks, William Joe.
So, Professor, that's becoming a running joke. Recently we had the amazing spectacle of an Irish cricket captain winning the World Cup for England. We've had Test match, Ireland against England, which means, as we often do in this series where we look back at the origins of various sports, cricket is one we should talk about. It's been a summer where cricket's been to the fore. You love cricket.
I absolutely love cricket.
All types. 5-day Test match, sign me up, that kind of stuff?
The longer the better. The 5-day game, a really exciting, well-played 5-day game, I love it.
And what's exciting about day 2?
Every single day is different, and it has different things, and depending on the match that draws you into it. It's the same as it's like me asking you what's exciting about day 2 of the Masters.
Yeah,
it's something happens always when the competition is going on. You can lose a match in one session of day 1, let alone it might take a couple of days for that loss to play out, but it could be gone from you. Okay. In any given session of any given the ebb and flow of the game. It's a wonderful thing to see, and now it comes from I suppose a childhood where I loved lying on the couch watching.
I was just going to say, because I always found it inaccessible, because nobody in my sphere growing up watched cricket. It was never on. The rules were not immediately attainable, and so I never really got into it. But I guess if you associate it with childhood sunshine and ice cream and lying on the couch, there's going to be a little warmth that'll come over you whenever it comes on the TV.
And just down from where we lived out in rural County Offaly, there was a cricket pitch.
Okay.
And the cricket pitch, nobody from the area played in it. It was lads had it rented, and we used to go in and take out the bats and balls and play with them in the place.
Okay.
And more than that, again, we had really good family friends, the Ginas, whose the father was an Indian man who absolutely adored cricket, and he explained the game fully to me when I was 7 or 8.
So you know the Duckworth-Lewis method and all that business. Is that what it's called?
I have made no attempt to understand the Duckworth-Lewis method. So,
I mean, look, this is the most quintessentially English sport I can think of.
Yes, in the imagery of it, it's warm beer and ale on the porch. It's Pimm's along the side. It's gentlemen in the soft summer air of a pompous English village.
And there is something about me that finds this very appealing, I have to admit. I can see the appeal of this game.
Well, it's languid luxury on evenings spent doing nothing. And it is not a taxing game physically if you want to play it in a very light-hearted way. It's obviously hard. If you want to play it hard, you can play it hard.
Yeah.
But if you want to enjoy it, and you can play it till you're a very decent age.
Yeah, I know. I mean, my main exposure to it now, beyond just seeing it on the TV, obviously, in recent times, is I live near the Phoenix Park. And I do like on a summer's evening, if me and my better half are walking through the park and we stumble upon a cricket game, it's a fun thing to stop and watch. And you do have the 15-year-old playing with the 70-year-old.
And do you watch the polo as well?
No. I haven't stumbled upon the polo.
It's amazing. The Phoenix Park is an extraordinary place for sport.
Yeah.
Just to ramble around the Phoenix Park and to look at the sheer diversity of the sport. Actually, I found my favourite ever bit of sports trivia. It comes from the Phoenix Park from 1924. The Tailteann Games was staged in Ireland. It was the Irish Olympics in the same year as it's kind of like the celebration of Irish independence.
What was in 24? Paris?
Paris was 24. So the staged what were basically the Irish Olympics to celebrate the foundation of the Irish Free State, and they invited all members of the Irish race from South Africa and Argentina to send teams, which they duly did. But the organiser of the game was a man called J.J. Walsh, who people might remember as the guy who arranged for the post boxes to be painted green after the independence of Ireland, changed them from red to green.
Right.
But Walsh knew he didn't have enough stars, so he contacted several stars from the Paris Olympics to come and compete with all these Irish competitors. And amongst the competitions that were held there was golf and football and hurling and various motorsports, was swimming. And the swimming competition for the 1924 Tailteann Games was held in the pond in the zoo in the Phoenix Park.
Right.
But it was actually won by Johnny Weissmuller, who went on to star as Tarzan in the movie This American Guy, and possibly good-looking man. So basically Tarzan won the gold medal in the 24 Tailteann Games in the pond in the zoo.
That's good trivia. Actually, I was chipping some golf balls in the Phoenix Park the other night,
That's illegal. I don't think you're allowed to do that.
I was just going to say this just straight away. This lad comes over in a Jeep, sirens blaring.
That's disappointing, Charles.
It's like, I'm not hitting them 200 yards. I literally chipping them from here about 15 feet away. He's like, no, you got to wrap that up, son.
People with guns came out of the bushes.
I don't know how he spotted me. He came out of nowhere. I was in a completely deserted part of the park. He's like, no, health and safety. Great. I chipped a few more after he drove off anyway. Not afraid to say it. So cricket, when do we start?
We can start...
Because this is a stick and ball game. So, like, how do you even date the origins of a stick and ball game?
You can't, because...
the first time anyone picked up a stick, they swooshed at something.
And it's one of those things, people hitting the ball with a stick. It's in all the old Irish literature, which is supposedly about hurling. We actually don't really know if it's about hurling at all. It's people hitting a stick with a ball.
Yeah.
We don't know the rules. We don't know what they did with those types of... Similarly, you look at Iceland, the Icelandic sagas, that all these Norwegian sagas, there's someone hitting a stick with a ball, but no idea what the game was. So it's better to jump forward to the early modern period, which is what historians call the period between 1500 and more or less 1800.
Okay.
And a game called cricket was being played in England during those years. But it was similar to other games such as stool ball, cat and dog, trap ball and tip cat.
Yeah.
And basically, it's people playing variations with a stick and ball, and it really thrived on the home counties of England, Kent and Sussex and Surrey, on the large commonage that was being played there.
It's amazing that you still associate those areas with cricket in such a big way.
Absolutely, and it's traditions of play predate the modern sporting revolution. We like to think we reinvented everything, but when the traditions of the past continue to wind their way through things.
And so it is because of the land in Sussex and Kent.
It's to do with the land, and the game of cricket took off in the 1700s for two basic reasons.
Okay.
First of all, the landed gentry in these areas adopted cricket teams and began to play matches for wagers.
Okay.
So they would give people jobs working on their landed estates by virtue of their cricketing ability, and clubs and teams were formed around that.
Okay.
And that matters for two reasons. First of all, there were wagers between the various landed gentry on who would win, and number two, people were gambling on them. Mm-hmm. So when you have that happening, you need a form of rules. Anytime money is at issue, you need a form of rules. So the first rules for cricket are written down in the 1740s and again then in the 1770s, 1780s.
And even the most recent Cricket World Cup final would suggest the rules need a bit of tweaking. They don't even know the rules fully.
No, and the people who were in charge did not know the rules of their own game at the very highest level of the most important day.
It's unbelievable.
It's a scandal. Absolutely, a scandal that you don't that the umpires did not know the rules.
And do the gentry play, or are they just paying the hired help and like watching?
Oh, they played.
They like it too.
They're
mixing.
They're mixing, and they're mixing. Obviously, there's the captain is the gentry, and it's really interesting. Even after cricket professionalised through the 1800s. All the way through the 1900s, it was the amateurs who captained the team. Even England did not have a professional captain until after the Second World War. It was an amateur. The amateur might be stone useless, but they were put in charge of the team to manage the men.
Why was that?
Not just class.
Oh, so the amateur was gentry.
The amateur came from a certain thing.
He's of the leadership gene pool. Yeah, he's a leader of men.
The same stock who did such a brilliant job in the charge of the Light Brigade or in the First World War and now with Brexit.
Right. Okay. So that's happening in the UK. When does it sort of spill over here?
Well, first of all, we kind of spilled over there. So the second most important thing in the formation of modern cricket happened in London, in a ground called the Artillery Ground. So this is a ground right in the middle of London where the British Army used to go on manoeuvres. But that land was bought in the 1740s by a man called George Smith.
Yeah.
Now, George Smith was a magnificent entrepreneur because George Smith owned a pub called the Pied Horse, which was right beside the only gate into the Artillery Ground. So you had to go by his pub to go into the Artillery Ground. So Smith had an ingenious idea. He paid for teams of cricket players to come up from Kent and Sussex to put on matches in the Artillery Ground, and he charged people into it, and he sold them drink. So this modern idea of getting absolutely and utterly locked at cricket matches, and indeed in wider sporting events, was made real in the 1740s by George Smith.
Right, okay.
But we went to them because amongst the other matches that George Smith put on in the 1740s, and this has been shown by two historians, John Bergen and Owen Kinsella, a brilliant article they've written on how he brought hurlers in to do exactly the same thing. Now, the fee for getting into the hurling was less than the fee for getting into the cricket, but he saw people drinking. Crowds of people came to watch hurling matches in London in the 1740s.
Isn't that interesting?
They could have had a different national game.
Yeah. I wonder why hurling didn't catch on. It's such a brilliant game.
The relationship between hurling and cricket continued in the 1800s when cricket was spreading more into Ireland and displacing hurling in various places. The argument was that hurling was a brutal, vicious and demoralising game, too dangerous to play, whereas cricket was manly and disciplined, and something that in the rhetoric of the sporting revolution was something that needed to be was more appropriate to modern life.
Okay, so there's hurling and cricket happening in the artillery ground. When does cricket spread to Ireland?
Cricket, there are forms of cricket played. Stool ball was played in Ireland. We have a record from 1612.
Right.
It's mentioned in a play that was performed in Castleknock in the 1640s. In the 1730s, Charles and Lord John Sackville are playing cricket in the Phoenix Park in Dublin. But then you must leap forward to 1792, the first organised cricket match in Ireland between the Garrison, a team representing the British Army basically, and the All-Ireland team, which is basically All-Ireland 11, which is basically the aristocracy. So it's the officers against the aristocracy from 1792 in what becomes an organised match on an annual basis.
It's funny, so you mentioned the Garrison. I mean, through the 19th century, and you're talking empire.
Yeah.
This is the Garrison game.
Oh, cricket is associated with the empire. Cricket is the great game of the empire. It is understood everywhere. And you must remember always that in the rhetoric of the British Empire, I mean, you must remember, first of all, the scale of the British Empire by the second half of the 19th century, extending across essentially 1/5 of the landmass of the earth, 1/4 of the people of the earth as part of the British Empire. And in the story of that empire, two things were said. It was proof of the genius of the British that they could conquer the world, and essential to that genius was the fact that they all learned their sports in the public schools, and sports were what made the English fit to conquer the world and gave them the courage and pluck that gave them the competence and ability and belief to conquer the world. That's the first thing. Second of all, it was viewed that cricket bound the empire together. So you could go to a cricket match in Calcutta or in Dublin.
Yes.
Or in Lahore, or wherever you went.
Because you quoted Lord Hawke here in your notes, who talks about sport and cricket, I suppose, cementing the ties that bond the whole empire together.
Yeah, and this is rhetoric, of course.
Sure.
But the idea was that a British army officer or a member of the British elite or a civil servant, of whom many were Irish, could travel the empire and see a recognisable sporting culture. And that sporting culture often involved a racetrack, but it always involved a cricket pitch.
Okay.
It was a fundamental thing.
Would you say cricket was maybe the most fundamental?
In the imagery of the British Empire, cricket is the fundamental game. It is true that rugby and soccer went in various places, more rugby than soccer. That explains rugby in South Africa, rugby in Australia, New Zealand, and so on. But cricket, equally, cricket spread in India in a way that rugby didn't. And of course, that's largely a relation to climate and everything around that. But so you get that absolute spread. But there was also cricket across America and Canada during this period, as there was rugby in the middle of the 19th century.
Right, okay. So it still is effectively an empire game when we watch it now.
Oh, it is utterly an empire game. There are a few minor exceptions. There's a bit of cricket in Holland and a little bit in Germany and places like that. But they're from kind of Anglophiles who took on the game in the 19th century when, as always happens with the greatness of an empire, people try and imitate that empire. And in this case, try to take its sports. And that explains in large measure the spread of cricket around Ireland and the foundation of clubs. Carlow, the first cricket clubs in 1830. Wicklow in 1830, the Phoenix Cricket Club in 1834, Trinity College in 1835, the Royal School of Armagh in 1854.
It is amazing that Trinity still has this cricket pitch and this very valuable real estate.
It is a wonderful thing that is the pitch that W.G. Grace, the great sporting celebrity, the most brilliant cricketer of the 19th century, but the biggest sporting celebrity in England in the late 19th century was W.G. Grace, and he played regularly on that pitch.
Isn't that right? And so if he was the biggest sporting celebrity of that time, so bigger than football, bigger than rugby.
Oh, he was the iconic sporting figure, an amateur as well. He was a doctor, he qualified as a doctor, but he never worked as a doctor. And he was an amateur who got paid.
So clearly it's a sport of the elite, but in Ireland, it's not overstating things to say this really is a game of the people as well. That is what people may be under the misapprehension this was the gentry and the elite, but actually this was everybody for a time in Ireland.
So it was the gentry and it was the garrison. It was a garrison game. There was a cricket pitch laid out at every significant British barracks in the country. All the public schools of Ireland had cricket pitches. Yeah. The elite on their landed estates had cricket pitches. Across the country, this is it. The most prestigious one was at the Vice-Regal Lodge, currently Áras an Uachtaráin, which had the most beautiful cricket pitch in the country. It had its own club in which the Viceroy and his elite staff played, but they also, the butcher, the baker and the servants also played on that same team, so they were hired by virtue of the power. So it is a game of the elite, but it's not just a game of the elite. And the story of the 1860s, 1870s and 1880s in Ireland, right up to it, including and after the founding of the GAA, is the story of cricket being played by all classes across Ireland.
And how popular was it?
It was the biggest game in Ireland in the 1870s and the 1880s, without question. You read the newspapers, whether it's the local press or the national press, and there are reports of cricket matches from all across the countryside. It is played there's a cricket club in every single county, but beyond the club there are teams which form. They may not be regular clubs that play a calendar of events every week, but there are teams formed which routinely play matches. Village against village, brass bands had teams, schools had teams. There's a great quote from Johnny Hawk, who's from Newcastle West, who talks about that idea of the cricket playing gentry, but then says, we all played ourselves around here and we were as good as them, if not better.
So, it's fascinating for a start that it was so popular, but it's also interesting that the likes of John Redmond, you talk about, who went to Clongowes College in the 1870s. He played his cricket. There are, I presume, raving nationalists who are playing then. If it's this popular, they're playing the most English of games. So how's the
Irish Republican
nationalist movement accommodating all this?
Because it's a place for the Irish Republican Brotherhood, for example, to meet at matches and to organise matches and to play around them.
They could meet at GAA matches, no?
Not in the 1870s.
Okay, but
from the 1880s onwards.
But they could meet at other events, no?
So the great person to do all of this, the great cricketer of the age, or the great most famous cricketer of the age in Ireland, is Michael Cusack, who is in the record of Blackrock College, then the French College was what it was called, but Blackrock College, where he was a teacher. And it's in the record from 1875 where he bought a bottle of brandy and a pair of cricketing pants. And he wrote as late as 1882 that there should be a cricket club established in every parish in Ireland, that cricket was a game to teach boys, and it was always boys he wrote about, virtue and manliness and courage and integrity and stoicism under fire. So as late as that in 1882, and he talked about it being the dream of every boy in Ireland to hit the winning six from the crease. And to be the toast of the village throughout the long winter.
In spite of its Englishness.
Yes, and this was the thing, and it was all the way through the Irish newspapers from the 1870s. The 1860s, for example, magistrates in Limerick celebrated the fact that the brutal and demoralising game of hurling should be replaced by the discipline of cricket. And newspapers such as the Freeman's Journal in 1875 are talking about how hurling is a problem because it causes too much excitement, and out of excitement comes violence, whereas cricket is modern. It teaches discipline and organisation and everything to do with
it. The irony of what you just said is the reason cricket declined and didn't catch on is because there was a complete lack, it seems, of organisation.
Yes, it is. So you ask somebody as to why cricket declined in Ireland from the 1880s onwards, and the reason which is always trotted out is the Gaelic Athletic Association.
GAA 1884 and the nationalist movement.
And they derided cricket as a garrison game, and they basically and the GAA was utterly vitriolic in how it attacked cricket.
Was it?
Oh, the things that were said about cricketers were Shawneens and traitors, and why wouldn't they play a real Irish game? The things that were said and written were outrageous.
And these were official GAA people in dispatches, were they?
Oh, and like you can go around the country. I'll give you an example from the Wexford County Convention of 1907. There was a local MP, a nationalist MP called Johnny Enright, was involved in a cricket club in Wexford. And he just gave a lend of a field to cricket club, and he was slaughtered.
Okay.
by ultranationalists who regarded him as a sellout and a West Brit and all of those terms that were thrown at him. So that absolutely happened, and to deny it happened is entirely wrong.
It's quite a quick switch from the 1870s, from Michael Cusack in 1882 talking about the virtues of this game, for it socially, it seems in a widespread way, to have turned so quickly. Like, I mean, public pressure wouldn't make me suddenly turn on a sport I loved.
Exactly. But, so this is why it doesn't quite ring through that enough of this is an issue, particularly because the very same attacks were made on rugby and on soccer, and both of those games absolutely thrived and grew in numbers all through this period. Now, it's not right to say that those attacks didn't matter, because they did matter, and they hurt hurling, or they hurt cricket in games in places where it was being played in rural areas, for example, where a GAA club is established and there are not enough numbers and people are pulled away from it. But cricket was very, very strong across rural Ireland through the 1890s. But what happened after that is two things are really important. First of all, the land war causes a sundering between the gentry and the public. So those great estates where there were cricket pitches are now lost. So that really matters. So there's a change in the kind of the social organisation of rural Ireland, and there's a change from the landlord, those 5,000 landlords who own the country, to the 70,000 tenant farmers who now take the land. And those tenant farmers they don't get involved. They don't need the land. They're not given their pitches for cricket. They want to rear cattle.
They need to feed themselves.
They need to do all of that stuff. So that matters. And what matters then, that's the first point. The second point is an internal cricket issue. The singular failure of the establishment of a cricketing body for Ireland. So this matters because William Lawrence, W.E. Lawrence, cricket was so popular in Ireland that he made a living from publishing the Lawrence's Cricket Annual from the middle of the 1860s until the early 1880s. And he wrote in the late 1860s of the absolute imperative of establishing a governing body for cricket in Ireland. And he called on the people to do it. He said, for example, we need men of a certain class there, and during the fortnight preceding the grouse and partridge shooting season, there will be many in the country, and they should all come together and found a cricketing union. And it never happened. So there was an attempt to establish the Irish Cricket Union, but immediately the Phoenix Club, there was a visiting team here playing against, and there was an Irish 11 selected, and there were only 6 members of the Phoenix Club on the team, and they kicked up a stink, and they refused to recognise the Irish Cricket Union. And it was only in 2001 that a fully formed Irish Cricket Union, what eventually became Cricket Ireland, was established.
Because I was reading the Irish Cricket Union is founded in 1923, which again is quite late. So what's that doing up until 01?
What that is doing is organising Irish teams to play against visiting teams when they come here, English counties, or maybe the West Indies will come every so often, or they'll play the Scots, or they'll play the MCC. And after 1980, they played in an English one-day competition called the English Gillette Cup, which they didn't win a match for 24 years in. But so it's doing that. But it doesn't have the allegiance of every section of cricket in Ireland. And there is no national competition which they can all give part. So there is a responsibility on cricket itself, as well as... I'm not saying the attacks from the GAA didn't matter. They did matter. But the social reasons were also important, and so were the failures of cricket themselves.
Right. Very interesting and complex, but it makes sense as to why soccer and rugby survived the attacks from the GAA. Across the 20th century, like, it thrives in certain pockets. Like, do we know why in North Dublin, for instance, it was, Owen Morgan? Do we know why in certain pockets of the country and parts of Dublin it seems to have survived? Is this just family tradition or something?
It's traditions of play, and the story of modern sport, again, is the story of the game that gets in first and gets established in a particular area, properly established with its own grounds, and often having its own grounds is essential to the presence and survival of the sport, because your own ground means that there is a property vested in a club which gives more reason for that club to survive and to thrive. And it's like a sport getting in first in the late 19th century, properly organised, is very, very difficult to shift out of it. Look, for example, at the story of rugby in Limerick, rugby in working class Limerick, where it is established and survives and thrives for a very long time.
Geez, cricket made a right mess of things then.
Yeah, it took them a long time, but we have to flip that story and point out what has happened in this new millennium and the strides made by Cricket Ireland. The fact is they get a permanent chief executive in the early 20th century, and that chief executive drove financing, drove recruitment, drove coaching, and a huge success. beating the West Indies in 2004, getting to the 2007 World Cup where Ireland beat Pakistan and Bangladesh, getting to the 2011 World Cup where Ireland beaten England, and slowly but steadily getting up to the ranks where the point is that Ireland then becomes a first-class accepted things and will play, in Test cricket across the coming years.
And is the future very bright? Do I have far to go now in any random spot in Ireland to find my local cricket pitch?
Oh, you do. You have a long way to go. Yeah. But what you have for the first time are people going into schools and playing the game in new schools, exposure to the game, and you get more access to programs, you get elite coaching, and critically, also, the women's game is developing at a rate of knots.
Right.
Now, the Irish women were always more successful than the men were. In 1988, they got to the 4th place in the Cricket World Cup, and they've made 5 Women's World Cups at various stages, and the game is played across various suburbs and in various schools really successfully by women. So there are more people playing the game than have played it since the 19th century.
And this is an impossible question, so don't feel under too much pressure, but I guess one of the sticky things in history is to try and judge the mood of a nation, attitudes, general feelings. Is there still, do you think, around the country when someone proposes getting into cricket or playing cricket, or, my son or daughter might play cricket, is there still an element of, it's a bit English, isn't it?
I think that I think there's an ignorance about the sport, which is understandable because people don't see it. And I don't think it's necessarily because it's English. I think it's because people don't understand it.
Okay.
And
so the Garrison game thing is gone.
People don't have that problem with other sports.
I know.
So I don't see that as being the issue for cricket. I think people don't understand it and they find it very complex when it's actually reasonably simple to understand it really quickly.
Well, the World Cup final suggests otherwise, but
no, but that's a really minutiae of detail. Like, there are rules within football and hurling that I guarantee you people don't know either. But so I think the reason why people don't play it more are the availability of clubs. There is not a network of clubs which is in easy reach of everybody. There are more than there used to be.
Yeah.
But it's not as widespread as you would imagine. And always, schools are crucial to the spread of any sport.
Yeah.
You get into a school curriculum, you've got a real chance.
And I certainly didn't play cricket at PE in my school days.
No, but you can see it now in national schools as part of programs.
Is it really? Yeah.
Part of various schools, and people getting into games, and you hear more and more of this happening. But it's competing with a whole lot of other sports. Like I was listening to that item that you had on here recently about ultimate frisbee, and talking about how that was spreading into sports. So people have now got a huge range to choose from. At the same time, there's more diversity in sport, and you get a drift away from membership of sporting clubs in terms of the numbers who are competing. So traditional sports that are really successful are in competition as well with all of these sports.
Yeah, it's true, because actually there was the ESRI report. It's gone back 6, 7, 8 years now, but it showed the start of that trend, and it tied in with that chat we had about golf a couple of weeks back, where you talked about people's leisure time compressing. The beauty of ultimate frisbee is that you don't have to be at training at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. You play it on your terms.
Yes, and it's not refereed except by the players themselves, so it doesn't demand the same infrastructure that other sports do. And but there's a hand-to-hand combat there for every sport, which is trying to remain prosperous and trying to deliver stuff. And sport always reflects the society in which it is founded.
And do you think we get to a point where cricket is in most towns in the next 50, 60 years, and there's a thriving national league and there's competition? And
I think that is the aspiration for cricket, but you would be a fool to say that, yes, that is what will happen, because that will demand resources, and it will also demand people who are currently involved in sports throwing down the sports that they love, abandoning them for cricket.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to see that happening. It certainly won't happen in every town.
Okay. Anything I didn't get to, or any final point you want to make about it?
No, it's one of those sports that people, I suppose, I wouldn't say reject, but they dismiss. And it's something with a storied history in this country, and the fact that there are mixed feelings. I think it should be said there are mixed feelings about Owen Morgan being the captain of of the English team, and like having previously played for Ireland.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of the rules. But international sport is so fraught with complexities of people shifting identity.
Oh, it gets sillier in the fringes, international sport, but this is right bang in the middle that cricket's been a bit silly. Eoin Morgan should not be able to play for England.
No, it's the structures, it's the way the structures were set up, but equally you can say the same about Declan Rice, you can say the same about
I sort of, that's different. Declan Rice is different.
The residency rules around rugby.
Yeah.
You know, the manner in which athletes can you have Kenyans running from Turkey, never having lived in the country.
All nonsense. But in a way, they're bypassing the spirit of the rule, whereas the spirit of the rule allows Eoin Morgan to zip over to England and go play for them.
Well, what the rule does is it facilitates people who already are controlling the game, ensure that control. And you can see it, like, look at the dominance of the All Blacks. It's built on the South Sea Islands as well as on All Blacks, and people are willing to go along with stuff which preserves their own position.
Yes, want to play Test match cricket? Over you come.
And that's and again, on one level, Eoin Morgan has to be absolutely admired from a young age. For him to get to the top of the tree, he couldn't play Test match cricket for Ireland. He would have had to wait until now.
100%.
With no guarantee that he could have done it. He set himself out, I want to be the best in my sport.
Yeah.
And to do that, I am going to have to play for England.
Totally. Sorry, if that came across as me somehow disparaging on Morgan, it's the opposite. Good on him. I'm just saying the law is a bit silly.
Well, what it created was, and this was something in this for hurling, what it created was an illusion or a culture and a structure which argues against the development of the game and the proper spread of the game.
Yes.
And the idea that there can be a broader base of people to play. A kind of a modern example, or an Irish example in hurling might be, say, Chad Wyer and Mark Kavanagh leaving the Laois panel and playing for Kilkenny.
Yeah.
Because Laois were a Joe McDonagh Cup team. Mm-hmm. And that would be wrong.
Yeah, and it stalls the development of the game. Listen, fascinating stuff. People may not realise we had such a genuine, rich tradition of cricket in this country at all classes and at all levels. Thanks so much, appreciate it.
My pleasure.